Hello everybody and welcome back to the United Stand. On today's afternoon show we have updates around Mason Greenwood's future, whether he'd want to come back to Manchester United triggering an extension in his contract. Is the door open for him to come back, or will we be selling him in the summer? There's a good update from The Athletic, we're going to get into that. Also, Erik Ten Hag's Mason Mount dilemma. Where does Mason Mount fit into this team? I believe Mason Mount has to start against Chelsea. Who drops out of the team to fit Mason Mount in? Is it a forward player? Is it a midfield player? What would your starting lineup be? I'm going to have that discussion with you guys in the chat as well. It's a really interesting one with a lot of different opinions coming in on that. I've already sort of tested the water on Twitter. Going to talk about it more on today's show. And also, Manchester United scouting €100 million Benfica midfielder João Neves. Such contradicting reports coming out that Manchester United want to spend £86 million on João Neves at least, but also Sir Jim saying that he doesn't want to spend big money on big names and he wants to make his own stars. So how does that work out? We're going to talk a little bit about that as well. But welcome everybody to the show. Happy Tuesday. Bank holidays literally kind of offset my schedule so much, but it is Tuesday today. We've got a midweek match in Chelsea. I want to put that it was abysmal, that display at the weekend. I want to put that behind us, but we've got to ensure that doesn't happen again. But with the way that we've been going this season, it feels like it will, and things need to change. Hence, one player isn't going to change anything, but hence why we need to get players in this team who can look after the football, Mason Mount, who have something to prove, Mason Mount, who give you energy, who give you legs, Mason Mount. And I'm not saying everything's going to change once you bring Mason Mount in, but there's other players I would bring into this team as well. Amad Diallo being another one. Ten Hag needs to make some changes, so we're going to talk about that. But thank you everybody for tuning in. Get your comments in, get the interaction going. But let's start off on the Mason Greenwood news. And basically, it's coming out from The Athletic that the expectation was that Greenwood would never play for Manchester United again, and then came Ratcliffe's comments leaving the door open for a return. So everybody has kind of seen Ratcliffe's comments on Mason Greenwood a while back. He said it's clear we have to make a decision. The process will be to understand the facts, not the hype, and then try and come to a fair decision based on values. Sir Jim Ratcliffe basically left the door open when he did his interview around Mason Greenwood. Now, my interpretation of this, and a lot of people's interpretation to this, is if you're going to sell something, you don't want to tell everybody that you have to sell it, because if you have to sell it, then people are going to try and offer you cut prices. It's like, you know, when you're doing a sale, when a shop's shutting down and it's doing a sale, everything must go. You're not going to go in there and play top dollar for it because you know it's going to have to be sold. So for me, that was a tactic from Sir Jim Ratcliffe to try and get a higher price for Mason Greenwood. I don't think Mason Greenwood would be coming back to Manchester United. But it's coming out also that sources with an understanding of Mason Greenwood's thinking said he would be reluctant to accept a chance to rejoin Manchester United, and he still has misgivings over how the club handled his case. So not only do I think Man United won't bring Greenwood back, I think Sir Jim's comments was basically just based on trying to get a better price for Greenwood, because if people know you need to sell him, and obviously the reputation that surrounds him, publicly, it's going to be tough to get a good chunk of money for him. But also Mason Greenwood doesn't want to come back, and I've spoke about this on the show before. I can understand why he doesn't want to come back, and I mean the way it was handled was horribly. And I'm not just talking about for Mason Greenwood, I'm talking about for the football club as well. Richard Arnold dropped an absolute stinker in the way he handled it, and I think that was the final nail in the coffin of Richard Arnold leaving the club, to be honest with you. He handled it so poorly. Everybody knew that the club were planning for Mason's return. Ten Hag was planning for Mason's return, and last minute when it got a load of backlash, the club completely U-turned on it. It was a disaster. The way that we handled it was a disaster. And why would he want to come back? He's doing well in Spain. The Spanish club's interested in him. There's clubs of Barcelona being interested in him. If he came back here, he would get absolute abuse every single game. And God forbid what sort of abuse he'd get if he dropped a stinker as well, which would be bound to happen at some point. I mean, the crowd, I mean, Man United as a whole just becomes the Mason Greenwood show. The media is on his back. He can start a new life over in Spain or even Italy or somewhere like that, and he can play for a top club still. So I understand why he wouldn't want to come back. But the new news on this, because we know all of this stuff already, and this is why, it's part of the show, because the new news is that Mason Greenwood's deal runs till summer 2025, with the club retaining an option to extend it for a further year. Deciding against triggering that clause would mean the player leaving Manchester United as a free agent at the end of next season, which some people would want to do, by the way, because there's been some talk saying, we shouldn't even be getting money for Mason Greenwood with what's happened. I don't agree with that, by the way. But then it comes on saying Manchester United have the option to extend Greenwood's deal to summer 2026, which protects his value and avoids the risk of Manchester United losing him for nothing next summer. So if we didn't extend it, the likelihood is Mason Greenwood would probably try and, the fee would either be really small this summer, or maybe another loan could happen, and then he'd eventually go on a free transfer. So Man United do need to trigger that extension in his contract. And if they do trigger it, you'll hear people saying, oh, United are planning to bring Greenwood back, that's why they've triggered it, they're just waiting. They're not. I highly doubt they are. They're just protecting his value. But also, Getafe, who, it's no secret Getafe want to keep him, but they won't be able to afford to keep him. One, because of his wages, and two, because of the money that Man United are going to want for him. It's going to be a different club that eventually buys Greenwood. It's been a good stepping stone for him. And to be honest, it's probably one of the only loan deals in recent history that's actually been a very good loan deal for Man United to do. So whoever made that happen, credit, because it's worked out well for both parties. So at Getafe, there is a belief that United have already triggered that option, but senior figures at Old Trafford insist there is no such decision has been taken over Greenwood's option, and there is no discussions held to that effect with either the player, his family, or interested clubs. I don't believe that there's been no discussions around what's going to happen with Mason Greenwood's future. We know that there's multiple Spanish clubs interested. We know that there's going to have to be a decision made about Mason Greenwood in the summer. I just don't think that decision is going to be public knowledge yet. But he won't be coming back to Manchester United. I can see that there's a lot of discussion in the chat about this. I can see there's a lot of different people thinking different things around Mason Greenwood. That's always going to be the case. But the best decision, in my opinion, would for both parties is to part ways in the summer. Now, here's an interesting one. What sort of money would you get for Greenwood, and, what sort of deal would it be? I see a lot of people talking about swap deals. Swap deals are extremely hard to pull off. The players both have to agree to different clubs. The money is hard to sort out due to the wages and who's getting the fairer deal. It's really, really tough. I think the most likely option is we get around 35 to 40 million for Greenwood, 40 million max. I don't think we'll get any more than that. And do you know what? If we do, it's pure profit that I didn't expect us to get this time last year for Mason Greenwood. So 35 to 40 million pound is pure profit to add to our summer transfer budget, which will help us, and I'm happy to just kind of cut ties and move on. What is another option which I thought would be really interesting? Dan Ashworth is very, very keen on Gleison Bremer. Man United have been linked to Gleison Bremer a lot, 27-year-old centre-back of Juventus. Romano spoke highly of him on the show, said he's built for the Premier League. Apparently, Juventus need money, and they want at least around 60 million for Gleison Bremer. I think the figure was 50 to 60 million, which, let's be honest, we're not going to spend on Gleison Bremer. We're not going to spend that sort of money, I don't think. But Juventus have been linked to Greenwood before, and that might be a team that could be keen on taking him. If Man United potentially could offer Mason Greenwood and £20 million for Gleison Bremer, that could be a deal that you do. You get a very good centre-back, and Greenwood was a loss that we were always going to have anyway. That could be smart business for Manchester United to do. So even though I've said swap deals are hard, if Man United could pull off, a swap deal for Gleison Bremer, you get a centre-back in for around £20 million, who's pretty good for Juventus and has got quite a good track history. He wouldn't be my first choice, but you could also bring in another centre-back as well. And we know that we need two centre-backs, but newsflash, everyone, we're definitely not dropping 80 million on Branthwaite and then another 60, 70 million on 60, 70 million on Gleison Bremer. Todibo, I think, could be around 40 million. We've got other positions we need to get, and we'll move on to why we're not spending nearly 100 million on João Neves in a second with that news coming out. But we've got arguably two centre-backs, a left-back, a right winger, a striker, a midfielder, we can't afford to be spending 100 million on 2 centre-backs. If you got rid of Mason Greenwood and you got Gleison Bremer return, that could be a good, smart bit of business for Ineos to kick things off with. You get Mason Greenwood out of the club, which needs to happen for both parties, and you bring in a centre-back that we need, that's physical, that can win aerial duels, that is strong, that is pacey. I mean, it could work out well for Manchester United, but are Manchester United good enough to pull off that sort of deal? Sir Jim, let's see, under Ineos, if we can make them sort of deals happen. But I reckon it'll just end up being a fee. And people are saying direct swap, Beth, no addition of fees. I mean, that would be even better, but Juventus are valuing Gleison Bremer around, 50, 60 million. I know people would value Greenwood at that price, but there is going to be money knocked off the price because of the reputation and the backstory and the baggage surrounding Mason Greenwood. That's just the way it is. If it could be a direct swap, even better. But let's see how things work out. A lot of people talking about saying it should be a direct swap. Bremer, I think Bremer has a release clause of maybe. I've done a show about this before. I think Gleison Bremer's release clause is around 50 to 60 million. I'm not sure. Let me look it up quickly what it is, because it actually is really interesting. Here, release clause. I know this. He has a release clause of 60 million euros. I knew it was between 50 to 60 million. So that is 51 million pounds. Maybe it could be a direct swap, but I don't see any club paying 51 million pounds for Mason Greenwood. I think 35 to 40 million is the max we'll get for him because of the backstory of what's happened. But interesting discussions in the comments. Keep your comments coming in, by the way, in any discussions you want to have, hot takes. Make sure you get your super chats in as well. And like the video. Thank you for joining us for our 2 p.m. show. Next thing I wanted to discuss is, do I discuss Mason Mount next, or do I discuss João Neves yet from Benfica? I'll discuss Mason Mount first, because I think this is more interesting, because I generally am writing off the João Neves story. I don't think there's much in it, but we will talk about it because it is a news show. But the Mason Mount dilemma, as you can see in the title, this is something I've been thinking about ever since the Brentford game. And it's not just because Mount scored a goal, Mason Mount scored a goal. A very good goal, actually, from the left side. And with his left foot, bagged it brilliantly. That should have been his moment. That should have been, we grabbed 3 points even though we didn't deserve it. But United, they can't hold on to anything to save their lives. They generally can't. Like, the amount we've conceded after just scoring this season is an absolute embarrassment. It really is. But Mason Mount, we bought him for just over £60 million. He's got the number 7 shirt. Yes, he's been injured for the majority of the season, but he is talented. He's just turned 25. He can look after the ball. He's got good energy levels, and I think he's got a lot to offer for that team. I think, considering how much that team has underperformed, Mason Mount needs to be starting against Chelsea. Ten Hag needs to fit him into that team, because we are underperforming. Our press is abysmal. Mason Mount's great at pressing. We can't look after the ball. Mason Mount keeps the ball well. Mason Mount scored a goal out of nothing, really. A good goal with a good finish. He deserves a looking into that team. I also think Ahmad deserves a run in that team. But we're talking about Mason Mount here, because where does he fit in? And I ran a poll on Twitter, actually, and I'm going to get that up now. Beth T MUFC on Twitter if you don't follow me already. Shameless plug there from myself. But let me bring up this poll. So, let me get it. So, I said, who would you drop from the starting 11 for Mason Mount? So, the options I give, and maybe we could run a poll in the community as well, in the chat. The options I gave was Rashford. He came on, obviously, on the left side in the game against Brentford and did a really good job. So the options I give was Rashford, Bruno, Scott McTominay and Garnacho. The results on Twitter were 24.8% said they'd drop Rashford, 15.6% said they've dropped Bruno, 57.5% said they'd drop McTominay, and 2.1% said they'd drop Alejandro Garnacho. And to be honest, I think the votes speak for themselves in the order of what I was thinking as well. But the only issue I have, obviously McTominay is the overriding overriding winner in my poll that I put on Twitter with 57.5%. But I would be dropping McTominay anyway, regardless of Mason Mount coming into the starting 11. And listen to me here. So, a lot of people, I mean, the majority of people, think that we need to bring in a midfielder into the midfield who gives us some height, gives us some energy, you know, can win the midfield battle for us. And a lot of people think that we're missing Casemiro, which Casemiro, his duels are great. He breaks up the play and his tackling ability is very, very good. The issue with Casemiro is he loses the ball like there's no tomorrow, gives the ball away all the time. It allows the other team to just jump straight on us and counter-attack us. And it really is detrimental to Manchester United. It really is. But my thinking was I'd want a midfield three of Casemiro, Mainu and Bruno. So Mason Mount doesn't come into that midfield there. I was thinking, who's underperforming massively? Rashford's underperforming massively. And I don't think it hurts to have these sort of conversations. Am I saying that Mason Mount is going to become our next left winger and he's a left winger and he should be playing left wing for Man United? No. But do I think we should entertain a conversation about where Mason Mount fits for the next game? And should we be able to drop players that are underperforming? At the end of the day, Garnacho underperformed in that game as well. But at the end of the day, Marcus Rashford's been underperforming for a very long time. He's on over 300 grand a week. He's one of the stars of the team. In that Brentford game, I thought he was completely anonymous and did nothing. You can't tell me that Mason Mount would at least be able to do a better job of what Rashford provided us in that Brentford game. He came on and he played better than Rashford. And it wasn't hard to do that. It's not just because he scored a goal. Now then, the link-up play between Wan-Bissaka and Mason Mount, it scares a lot of people because Wan-Bissaka, I mean, his overlap as a left-back is it's really poor. He's not a left-back whatsoever. He doesn't offer any support really for the winger going forward. Mason Mount isn't even a winger anyway. But what people forget is Mason Mount did play his best football for Chelsea on the left side. He can play that position. He can. So is that something that should be entertained? There's no harm in dropping underperforming players. I'm not saying it's forever. I'm not saying it's gonna be the solution. But conversations need to be had about it. When Marcus Rashford is playing his best football, he's our number one choice left winger, absolutely. But he's not playing his best football. He's nowhere near playing his best football right now. And I was having conversations on Twitter about this with a lot of people. So Mason Mount coming in for Marcus Rashford is an option on the left-hand side. He did it at Brentford. You know, it gives you the option of bringing Marcus Rashford on as a substitute. We know he's really powerful off the bench as well. Another option would be, and this is what I was speaking to about someone who I actually really respect their footballing opinions. He's called H on Twitter. And he was saying, you know, the thought of Mason Mount and Aaron Wan-Bissaka on the left side, the balance of it feels like his eyes would bleed thinking about that. And I mean, I was thinking my eyes was bleeding watching Rashford anyway, to be honest with you. I mean, like with what he was providing us. And by the way, the whole team played badly. I'm not pinning that result on Rashford. The whole team was poor. Garnacho was poor. You know, Bruno was poor. But McTominay was a disaster. Like, loads of people were poor in that game. I'm genuinely not pinning it on Rashford whatsoever, but he's been a consistent underperformer. And Mason Mount did come on and do really well in his position. But he was saying, and this is another option, and make sure you vote in the poll, is Casemiro does give the ball away a lot. That is detrimental to our shape. It's detrimental to teams being able to counter-attack us. He was saying he would play Mason Mount in the midfield and he'd play a midfield three of Mainu, Mount and Bruno Fernandes. And my instant reaction to this was no. The reason why it was a no is because I don't think there's enough height in there and physicality. Casemiro provides you with physicality and he provides you with height. Like him or loathe him, and I don't think McTominay should be starting for Man United, but he provides you with height. You need height in the midfield, in my opinion. You know, Arsenal have it with Declan Rice. Manchester City have it with Rodri. I do think you need height in the midfield, but he said, look, we're playing so poorly as it is. What he wants to, and he's saying he agrees, you know, there wouldn't be much height in there, but he said, what you would see is 3 midfielders who can look after the football. And I know what people are going to say, Bruno is a loose cannon on the football. He can be, but he also can look after the football if he's directed to do so. Bruno's also the captain, so I doubt he's going to get dropped. Mainu looks after the ball, Mount looks after the ball. Mainu has very good energy, and he's actually got has got the highest percentage of duels won in the midfield. Out of our whole midfield kind of options, he has the most duels won this season, and some of the best games he's played for United, he actually has played as a 6, to be honest with you. Mason Mount can play as an 8, and he looks after the ball well. Bruno Fernandes, if he's been instructed to do so, can also look after the ball. We've seen games from Bruno where he keeps it simple. He just needs to do it more often. Could that be an option to help us keep the ball more? Do you know what? Most people say you don't have to defend as much if you've got the ball, if you're keeping the ball. This is Chelsea. Despite how poor they've been this season, and honestly, to draw against Burnley with 10 men, with them having 10 men, is laughable. And if we get beat by Chelsea, I'm going to be so embarrassed. But they can play football, and they are a threat to us, especially with the way they're playing at the moment. We need to get this right on Thursday. And I think Mason Mount needs to be in the team. So I'm in a position where I'm like, it's either Rashford out for Mason Mount, or McTominay's out anyway, or it's Casemiro out for Mason Mount, really. Which one would you do? I think it's a tough one. It really is a tough one. But I think I would go with, ultimately now, if I had to decide on a starting 11, I think I would go with Rashford out for Mason Mount. That's what I think I would go with. Because despite the fact I don't think Mount's the answer at left wing, I don't. Rashford's been underperforming, and Mount genuinely can't do any worse than what was provided for us against Brentford. Let's try him out. Let's see if he can build on that performance he brought in against Brentford. But get in the comments what you think. People are saying Beth won't say a bad word on Bruno. Why is Beth protecting Bruno? I mean, you could drop Bruno for Mason Mount, but it's not going to happen. So what's the point of discussing it? Ten Hag will not drop Bruno for Mason Mount. It's not going to happen. He's his captain. And to be honest with you, I wouldn't drop Bruno for Mason Mount. I'm going to be honest. People won't like that from me, but I wouldn't. Has Bruno been massively underperforming? Yes, he has been. But I still think he needs to play. But what I would say is I do think Ten Hag needs to substitute him more. I'm absolutely on board with that. He needs to substitute him more when the game isn't going well and Bruno's underperforming. He needs to. Who would you drop from the starting 11 for Mason Mount? So I'm going to have my vote in there. And let me have a look. So 31% of you are saying Rashford, 26% of you are saying Bruno, 41% of you are saying Scott McTominay, and 2% are saying Alejandro Garnacho. Ahmad deserves a go on the wing. Well, exactly, that's another question that you bring into play. Do you put Ahmad on the right? Garnacho has been doing really well there, had a pretty poor game against Brentford. Was that just a blip because he was hungover? Not hungover like hungover from alcohol. I mean, hungover from all the travelling he did with Argentina and playing for Argentina. They're questions that need to be asked. What would your starting 11 be? How does Mason Mount come into this team? I mean, a lot of you guys would drop Bruno. Would a midfield 3 of Mainu, Mount and Bruno work? Get in the comments. Do you know what? I'd love nothing more for a midfield 3 of Mainu, Mount and Bruno to work. I just really worry about the height and physicality. I mean, could we test it out though? We could absolutely test it out. It cannot get worse than what we saw against Brentford. It can't. Like, it physically cannot get worse. Do you know, people talk about McTominay being in there for height. Mount is a better player than McTominay. He would bring more to a midfield in that position than McTominay would. Like, I would be up for trying it. I would really be up for trying it. And you know what? If Ahmad's going to start on the wing as well, I mean, it's an option. It really is an option. But get in the comments what you think, because this is why I said it is a dilemma, because it is a dilemma. What do you do with Mount? He needs to come into the starting 11. Where does he play? Because someone's got to get dropped. And this team has been underperforming, so you have to drop players. Is it going to be Rashford? Is it going to be Bruno? Is it going to be Casemiro missing out? Tomine, I mean, has to be dropped no matter what, because just didn't give us anything as a starter last game. What happens? Get in the comments what you guys think. People saying hi to FC, we are not Stoke. I understand people saying that, but height is an important factor. I mean, top managers in the league will tell you that. Top managers in the league will tell you that. Height has been, you know, it's important to have it as an element as your team. I'm not saying we need a starting 11 of 6 foot plus in every position. I'm not saying that, but it is important to have some height in there. Set pieces, you know, winning aerial battles. It is important. But anyway, that's why, I mean, why do you think Pep Guardiola plays with like 4 centre-backs across the back 4 and then Rodri in midfield? Height is important. Height is important. Anyway, let me talk about this last little bit coming in as well. And this is about João Neves. Obviously, João Neves, incredible talent at Benfica. Man United have been linked to him a lot. A lot of people want to see a double pivot of Kobbie Mainoo and João Neves at Manchester United. Again, both top-class players. Do you worry about the height? Both really young players, so could actually grow even more, to be honest with you. But it's been coming in from Sport Witness that Manchester United have more than €100 million ready to convince Benfica to sell João Neves. Manchester United scouted the 19-year-old many times this season and will once again send an official to do so tonight in Benfica's derby against Sporting Lisbon. Man United are said to be delighted with the good season João Neves has been having, and they now want to have him playing with Bruno Fernandes in their midfield. So we know Bruno Fernandes has spoken very highly of him. We know Bruno Fernandes thinks he has an amazing future, and we know Bruno Fernandes, you know, has spoke to him and played with him at the Portuguese national setup. That isn't a secret. Reports came out a bit ago that Bruno Fernandes actually recommended Man United to sign João Neves. I don't know how true that was. But this is where it doesn't make sense for me. Sir Jim has outwardly spoke about not paying massive fees for players. João Neves is going to cost you at least 85 million, in my opinion, probably more. Is his price just going to go up? Yeah, it probably will. But that's what it's going to cost you. He spoke about making his own Mbappés, his own Bellinghams. We have got a left-back to sign, 2 centre-backs arguably to sign, a striker to sign, and a midfielder to sign, and we're talks about getting Elise. There is no way we are dropping half our transfer budget on João Neves. I just don't see it happening. But apparently Man United are going to put in an £86 million bid for him, according to Sport Witness. But I don't believe it, because as good as João Neves is, we're not in a position where he can spend that. Unless we're planning to sell a lot of players and make a lot of money this summer, which doesn't look like it's going to be the case. We are not going to spend 86 million on João Neves, as much as I would love to sign him, because, like I said, you know, no one's talking about how much Jude Bellingham cost at Real Madrid because he's been unreal for them. No one talks about your transfer fee if you fulfil it, and João Neves absolutely has the capability to fulfil it. He looks top draw. I'm not doubting that. Do I think he'd be a great addition to Man United? Yeah, I do. But we're not spending near enough 100 million on João Neves this summer. We're just not going to do it. Plus, you know, João Neves, Mainoo and Bruno, would that work as a midfield 3? Would it? I would love it to, and I think João Neves and Kobbie Mainoo could work brilliantly together, but is there enough height? People will continue to talk about height, and I will also do that because it is important in the Premier League. But João Neves is a brilliant player. He's got brilliant potential. If we spent that money on him, I doubt people would even speak about it in the future, because I do think he has the capability of fulfilling that price tag. But the fact of the matter is, we're not spending that much money on one player. I just don't see it happening. I just don't. So that's why I would kind of rule that out as being false. I don't think Man United will spend £86 million on João Neves. But whoever does buy João Neves is going to be a very lucky club, because he's a top player. You know, a club like who could afford to do something like that is Man City. It's just a cherry on top of the cake. They don't need about 5 different positions, so they don't need to scrimp and save. United are under the cosh with financial fair play, and we need a lot of different positions because our squad isn't good enough. What actually needs to happen is we need a big clear out of selling players who aren't good enough for decent money, and then we could afford to do deals like this. But, you know, according to Mark's good source, you've seen him speak about the United stand before, we're not selling anyone of really any big significance this summer, which means I don't think we'll recoup that much in sales. Sancho, Greenwood, past that, where are we looking for sales? International 2675, Mount is very average, just a slight upgrade to McTominay. Don't agree. Don't agree that Mount's average. I think Mount's a good player. We've not really seen anything of what he can do for United yet because he's been injured, but we need to find a space in this team to at least give him a chance. But the poll on who would you drop from the starting 11 for Mason Mount is ending on 32% Rashford, 25% Bruno, 41% McTominay and 2% Garnacho. So interesting stuff from you guys. The one thing I would say, if it is Rashford, I agree with the sense of Wan-Bissaka isn't a left-back. We are missing a left-back massively. The balance on that side, and to be honest, the lack of support Rashford was getting from Wan-Bissaka, like, it is an issue. Like, it's not a permanent solution if you drop Rashford and bring Mount in. But I think it would be better than what we've seen against Brentford. But then again, you know, if you drop McTominay for Mount and you play Mainu, Bruno and McTominay, there is a slight worry over physicality and height, especially away from home at Stamford Bridge. There's drawbacks in every scenario. But we've got to make a decision because McTominay shouldn't be starting. Like, let's be honest, he shouldn't be, and Ten Hag can't keep persisting with that. He can't be starting in the position that he's playing. It's just not working. And then the front three, just there was nothing. There was nothing from it against Brentford, and that's been our best front three all season. Is, you know, when we play a team that are going to, I mean, people would say, how is Brentford a low block because they absolutely battered us, but they set up really well in terms of their structure. We struggled to get past it. We struggled to get through it. We need different options. Amad Diallo getting into the half space is another option. Mason Mount, who actually has some creativity as well. Let's give Højlund more than one chance in a game. Højlund had one chance against Brentford. Let's provide a chance for Rasmus. Let's see if we can do that. I mean, something needs to change. Erik Ten Hag has a dilemma, and he needs to not keep persisting with the same thing and expecting different results. That's what Einstein called insanity. We need to see some changes in the starting 11, and we need to see some people given a chance. But get in the comments what you guys think. It's a really interesting topic, and I'd be interested to think your thoughts on the situation. Please hit a like on the video. We really do appreciate all your support, and please hit a like on the video. We really do appreciate it. And thank you, everyone, for getting your comments in as well. And it's a really interesting debate. There's people coming at it from all angles, and what Ten Hag must be thinking. He has a dilemma now. What does he go for? I'll be interested to see what he does decide to do. But if I tune into that Chelsea game and Mount's on the bench again and Amad's on the bench again, and it's the same starting 11 from the Brentford game, I'm going to be really annoyed, because that performance, there has to be changes made. We cannot lose at Stamford Bridge. We just can't. It's embarrassing considering where Chelsea are in the table. And, you know, you start looking behind the clubs in the league, the clubs behind us in the league, and you start thinking, wow, where are we really going to end up? I mean, we've got Liverpool on Sunday. All it takes is a couple results in this league, and you're looking at things a lot differently. Hopefully we can bounce back, and hopefully Ten Hag makes the right calls. But get in the comment what you think. Dinky says, Beth, can you just be honest? I have been honest. I've literally said exactly what I think. I said I wouldn't be opposed to dropping Rashford because I think his performance was really poor. I don't think McTominay should start, and I wouldn't be upset if Casemiro didn't start because I think he gives the ball away too much, and it puts us in spots of bother continuously. That's what I think. And despite the amount of people going in on Bruno, and I could easily just sit and go with the crowd and say, yeah, I think Bruno should be dropped as well. I don't think that. I defend Bruno because I think he's a good player. I go against the grain on that. So I am honest. But thank you everyone for watching. Have a lovely rest of your day. Mark will be back later on, I think for the 8 p.m, but I don't know if he's going to be doing a watch along tonight. I'm not sure. But he will be back later on for all the latest transfer news. Get in the comments what you think. Would you want to drop 86 million on João Neves? I mean, is there something in this? We do keep getting linked to him. Let me know, and I will see you on the next one.